Hello, hello, here we are again because of Mr. Terupt. We are on Luke's chapter. We just found out that Anna and Danielle are blaming themselves. Pretty much everyone's blaming themselves for this accident. So let's see what Luke has to say. The last time we saw Luke, he went to visit Mr. Terupt first. He was the first student. He said it was really scary. So let's see what's happened to him since then. Here we go. Luke, I didn't think it would be as difficult going to see Mr. Terupt the second time. I knew what to expect. I was wrong. Seeing Mr. Terupt in that bed again wasn't easy either. I thought he looked better. I thought he was improving, but he looked the same, still just laying there in his bed, surrounded by the same beeps and tubes and monitors and noises from the hall. It was all just the same. I felt the lump in my throat growing. Mom's hand touched my shoulder. She saw it happening too. I stood at the side of my teacher's bed in a state of disbelief, feeling helpless. Then the doctor walked in. At least I figured he was a doctor. He had salt and pepper hair, a white coat, and a smart face. He nodded to us, then moved towards Mr. Terupt. He checked some numbers and fluids, pulled back Mr. Terupt's eyelids to look at his pupils with his pen light, and then started to leave. "Wait," I said. "Wait." He stopped and turned around. "Are you Mr. Terupt's doctor?" I asked. "Yes, I'm Dr. Wilkins, one of the physicians. Is Mr. Terupt going to get better?" I saw him take in a big breath. He looked at my mother first, then me. "I don't know, son." "What's wrong with him? He's in a coma, but what's wrong with him?" Mr. Wilkins pulled some chairs over for all of us to sit in. He sat across from me. "Mr. Terupt did a lot of wrestling while growing up, and even into college," he started to explain. Turns out he had to give it up because he had suffered multiple concussions along the way. These concussions have weakened his brain in certain regions. The snowball that was thrown hit one of those weaker areas, the temporal, region to be exact, and it cracked his skull. Dr. Wilkins looked very sorry as he said this. I don't know if he expected questions, but I had them. "Does that mean Mr. Terupt wouldn't be in a coma if he hadn't suffered the multiple concussions?" I asked. "I can't say for sure, but probably not." "What do you do now? Just wait?" Dr. Wilkins took in another big breath. I got the sense there was more to the equation, more bad news, or news he was hoping not to share. He glanced at my mother, who nodded, giving him the okay to explain. I didn't want a sugar-coated report. I wanted the facts, and my mother knew that. Mr. Terupt had some bleeding going on behind this crack, and the blood is collecting, in his brain. We hoped it would stop, but it hasn't. He needs to undergo brain surgery so that we can clamp the bleeding vessels. And then he'll be okay? If it works, hopefully, yes. I heard the word "if" loud and clear. "And if it doesn't?" I said. "Brain surgery is tricky. There's always a chance patients won't recover." "You mean die," I said. Mom put her arm around me. "What's your name, son?" "Luke." "Yes, Luke. Your teacher could die during or as a result of the surgery, but I'm going to do my very best not to let that happen." I got up and stood by Mr. Terupt's bed. I looked at him. Dr. Wilkins got up and stood next to me. "He's a pretty special teacher, isn't he?" the doc said. I could only nod. Speaking would have made me cry like a baby. "I'll do my best, Luke. That much I can promise." He squeezed my shoulder and left the room. Brain surgery, I thought. Mr. Terupt might never come back. I ran out into the hall. "Dr. Wilkins," I yelled. He turned around. "Does anyone else in my class know what you told me?" Dr. Wilkins walked back towards me. "We didn't know anything about his concussions at first," he said, "but another teacher, Miss Newberry, was able to provide us with Mr. Terupt's background information. I guess Mr. Terupt had told her about his wrestling days, and it's a good thing because we have had no other contact person for him." I stood there quiet. No other person. There was nobody for Mr. Terupt. "But to answer your question, there is another student in your class who knows what I told you," Dr. Wilkins said. "Who?" "I think he said his name was Peter." I was silent. Peter? I didn't think Peter had been here. Dr. Wilkins turned to leave. "Wait," I said. "Does Peter know about the concussions, or just the brain surgery is next?" "Just about the brain surgery. Why do you ask?" "Because Peter threw the snowball." What could that mean for Peter? All right, so that is the end of Luke's chapter, and we are moving on to April. So that was all happening in March. Now we are in April, and we are going to start with Jessica's chapter. Here we go. Act 10, Scene 1. Mrs. Williams assumed responsibilities as our teacher. She recognized and acknowledged our huge mess and that our feelings, despite our being just fifth graders, were very real. I respected Mrs. Williams for her courageous act, but it didn't change a thing. Mr. Terupt lay motionless inside the vast whiteness and beeping of that building. Our classroom remained as lifeless as our teacher. We needed Mr. Terupt back. Things happen for a reason. That's what I told Jeffrey. Do I believe that? Sometimes. What were the reasons for my dad leaving us? I haven't figured that out yet. And what are the reasons for Mr. Terupt's predicament? I've decided that they're different for everyone, and maybe not there at all for others. I see the reason for Alexia now. Without this accident, I'm sure she would have made it back. I'm not sure she would have made it back as my friend. Without this accident, I bet Danielle would never have made it over to Anna's house. But what about someone like Luke or Jeffrey? I don't see any reason for either one of them. And I can't find any reason for me. I was stumbling a lot there. I'm sorry. All right, I can read Luke's got a small paragraph, so here we go. Luke. The classroom persisted in secreting, unbroken, quietness. I stayed quiet too, even though I had a lot bottled up inside me about Mr. Terupt's brain surgery. Peter knew about it, but he didn't have all the details. I know he blames himself. You can see it. Ever since the accident, he walks around like a mummy. He should be blaming himself. He threw the snowball. But if it had hit anyone other than Mr. Terupt, I don't think we'd be experiencing a tragedy like this. That's what Peter needs to know. It doesn't make everything all better, but it might help ease his pain. I can't tell him, though. Nobody is talking to him. But that's not why I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to find out why he threw that snowball. Maybe that's why no one else is talking to Peter. All right, so that is the end of Luke's chapter, so I'm going to stop there. And we will see you next time for Danielle's. So we'll see you soon. Bye.